Good morning, everybody. Just wait for a few minutes to join some other members. All of you, please mute yourself first. Srino sir. Srino sir. Hello.
Chapan sir.
Sir, is it my voice is audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Now I share the screen also, sir. So
Okay,
please,
sir. Okay.
please check one, sir. So what's the
Okay, sir.
topic on the screen, sir? What's the
Oh,
topic? I think it is
screen is
syllabus
not
chapter.
visible, sir.
Sir, please try to check once. Actually, I'm showing the syllabus now, unit 3.
No, sir. Screen is not visible, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Now, sir.
Wait, sir. No, sir.
No.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, sir. Actually, I'm checking with some other phone. So I'm having the
Okay, sir.
visibility.
Okay.
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 All of the members having the able to visible the screen or not, please respond to the chat box once. Respond any one student, please. Whether all of the members able to see the screen or not. Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, 31.
Hmm.
Okay, I continue my session, sir. Thank you. In the last class, we're discussing about the unit 3, that is patterns. Okay, so in that patterns here we are already discussing pattern description and another thing, organizing catalogs. So now today we are discussing about roles in solving design problems and selection and uses. So we are already discussing about these patterns in the last class, and this is the syllabus. Okay, so in the third unit, this is the first part. In the second part, creational patterns, abstract factory, builder, factory method, prototype, singleton. So these topics we are discussing in the next class. So we are already discussing the course outcomes also. So after learning these chapters, so that means so third unit, fourth unit, fifth unit, we can able to understand the design patterns and underlying the object oriented concepts, and students can implement the design patterns able to get the solutions for the real world software design problem. So that means we are achieving these course outcomes after the completion of 3, 4, 5 units. Okay. In the last class, we are discussing about what is a pattern. Okay, software patterns are reusable solutions to recurring the problems that occur during the development. So that means these are used for to solving the problems in the real-time environment. So that means pattern means in which type of a we are arranging the modules. So that nothing but we are providing some interface. So this will be creates the some easier interaction with the users. Okay, so in the case of pattern, here mainly we are consider the four things. Those are the pattern name, problem, solution, consequences. These topics we are already discussed in the last class. So the pattern name specifies. So what is the purpose of the particular pattern or maybe the particular module? Okay, and another one is the before designing any type of the software, definitely architects may be having the clear idea about the what we are to be achieved, what to be we are achieved. Okay, so that is mentioned into the problem specification. So in the case of normal projects also, we are mentioned in that documentation. So what we are achieved. So what is the existing system? What is the proposed system? So that means here we are not mentioning the proposed system. Just only we are specifying what is the problem. So why we are developing this? What is the need for developing this? If you are not developing this, then what will be the situation? So that those type of scenarios are described in this context. So that means problem. So another one is the solution. So that means in this thing here we are mainly focused on to the proposed system. So that means how we are solving this problem, which type of strategies are used, or maybe which type of methods are used, in which type of way we are solving the existing problem by using this proposed system. So that will be mentioned in the solution. And another one is the consequences. So that means after developing some solution, so then what will be the status? So whether it will be completely satisfied by the users or maybe the organization. So whether it will be giving the good results or maybe the bad results. So how much of quality attributes are we are achieved? So all these things are mentioned into the consequences. So So all the topics we are discussed in the last class. Okay. And another thing is the organizing the catalog. So that means how we are organizing this catalog. Design patterns vary in their granularity and level of abstraction. So that means here design patterns are maintains some particular hierarchy and their level of abstraction also. So that means here we are providing some abstraction for to the end users. So different types of levels are used. So because there are many design patterns, we need way to organize them. So at this time of situation, we need to organize the catalog. So what is the best way? So in front of the users. So that means here we are mainly focused on to the in terms of user point of view only. Why? Because users not having the programming knowledge. So that's why. So we try to organize the catalog in a better way. So that will be giving the easier abstraction to the end users. So this section classify the design patterns so that we can refer to the families of related patterns. The classification helps you learn the patterns in catalog faster, and it can direct efforts to find new patterns as well. So that means, so when we are following this catalog, so then we can easily arranging those type of patterns, and we can learn a new type of patterns, and we can giving the best patterns to the end users. So here mainly we are considered upon to the two types of criteria. Those are purpose and another one is the scope. So in the case of purpose, the first criterion called purpose reflects what pattern does. So pattern can have either
$944.
structural, behavioral purpose. Am I right or not? So that means here,
Double eight
so we are already discussing about to this. Here, in the case
zero three
of, hello,
18.
hello. Some of the members' voice is raised here. Please check once. I think it's Srinivas, sir.
Okay, sir.
So all of you mute yourself first. Don't try to create any type of the disturbance. Okay, thank you. So in the case of patterns, these are we can classify it into the three types. So those are, the first one is the creational pattern, structural pattern, behavioral patterns. So I think the name is implies what is the purpose of the pattern. So in the case of creational pattern, just only we are creating the object. So in the case of structural pattern, here we are arranging some type of the modules in the objects. So in the case of behavioral pattern, what is the functionality of the particular pattern, whether those type of modules are properly functioned or not. So if you are observing these three topics, these three are the three units. So in the case of third unit, we are discussing about the creational patterns. In the case of fourth unit, we are discussing about the structural patterns. In the case of fifth unit, we are discussing about the behavioral pattern. Okay, creational patterns mainly concerns with the process of object creation. So I already discussed in the last class. In creational patterns mainly focus on the how we are creating the object. So that means here only main thing is establishment only. Structural patterns deals with the composition of classes or objects. So that means structural patterns mainly focus on to the composition of classes or objects. So that means here we are how we are arranging the structure. So which type of things are we are involved into the structure. So these type of design criteria fall into the structural patterns. In the case of behavioral patterns, characterize the ways in which classes or objects interact, distributed responsibility. So that means here we are verifying the modules responsibility, and we are verifying the performance of those modules and functionality. So like this at the same time, so which type of modules are collaborated one to another. So that means here we are observing the interaction within the modules also. Why? Because this is the behavior pattern. So that means in which type of way it will be behaves. So for example, maybe if we are click the button pay, so then whether it is responding in the proper way or not. So that will be verified into the behavioral pattern. So that means here we are consider three types of patterns. Those are creational patterns, structural patterns, behavioral patterns. In the case of creational pattern, mainly considered under the creation. Structural patterns mainly considered under the structure. So that means in which type of way we are arranging the structure. So how many number of classes are there? How many number of objects are there? So how many number of modules are there? So like this. So in the case of behavioral pattern, so how that module performing the functionality. So that will be verified into the behavioral pattern. Okay. The second criteria is scope. So specifies whether the pattern applies to the primarity of the classes to objects. Class patterns deal with the relationships between classes and their subclasses. So here in the case of second criteria, we are based upon the scope. So that means specifies whether the pattern applies primarily to classes to objects. So that means Definitely, we should be based upon to the object-oriented concepts in the pattern designs. So otherwise, we are facing different types of the problems, or maybe increasing the code, and we are not able to find out the errors. We are already discussed in the first unit. So different types of architecture styles and patterns. Am I right or not? So in that case, here we are discussing the three types of architecture styles and patterns. What are they? So the first one is the centric, and second one is the layer, and third one is the object oriented style. So in the case of centric, just only, so all the process based upon to the single stories. So why? Because that is a centric. Okay, in the case of layered one, so we are based upon to the hierarchy to performing any type of the execution. So in the case of object oriented concepts, we are able to move from anywhere to the anywhere. Why? Because we are using different types of methods, and we are using different types of concepts like maybe runtime polymorphism, static polymorphism, or maybe we are using methods. At the same time, we are using abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance. So like this, here we are using different types of object-oriented concepts in the object-oriented architecture styles. Okay, so here we are verifying whether we are including those concepts in the pattern or not. So that will be verified into the in this criteria. So that means the first criteria is mainly focus on to the which type of pattern and how that pattern will be works. Okay, so second type of criteria will be mainly focus on to the whether we are applying the concepts of classes or objects in the pattern. Okay, class patterns deals with the relationships between classes and their subclasses. So what is a class? Class is nothing but a group of objects, or maybe collection of objects, or maybe class is able to define the methods, at the same time define the objects also. So and able to creating the objects. And what is an object? What is object means? Object is an interface from the class. Okay, and object is a runtime entity. Okay, these relationships are established through inheritance, so they are static, fixed at compile time. So that means, so we are not able to run the class. I mean, I don't know. So just only we can run through objects only. So that's why these are the static. So these relationships established through inheritance. So that means how the relationship between one class to the another class, or maybe how the relationship between one main class to the one subclass through inheritance only. Am I right? So inheritance means nothing but inherit the properties from parent class to the its derived class. So previously we have mentioned before performing the compilation. So which type of classes are connected one to another? So that is nothing but static. But in the case of object, so we are not specified exactly. Why? Because so that will be based upon to the users. So maybe based upon that using that object, we are run the some other thing. So for example, maybe object name is A. So then how we can call that method A dot run. So then how we are passing the values, maybe A dot run 1, A dot run 1 comma 2, A dot run 1 comma 2 comma 3. So that means here, even though it is the same name, but calling the three types of functions here. So that means this is not performing before the compile time. So this is the run at only runtime only. So that's why object patterns deals with the only dynamic things. So object patterns mainly deals with the object relationships. Okay, so those are run at runtime. So almost all patterns use inheritance to use some extent. So the only patterns labeled class patterns are those not focused on the class relationships. Note that most patterns are in the object scope. Okay, so if you are observed here, so in the case of class and object, how we are consider this? This is also we are discussed in the last class: creational pattern, structural pattern, behavioral pattern. So in the case of class, mainly we are consider the factory method, structural pattern adapter, behavioral pattern template method interpreter. So in the case of object, creational, so abstract factory builder prototype singleton. So in the case of structural adapter, bridge composite decorator fcat flyweight proxy. In the case of behavioral, chain of responsibility command iterator mediator memento observer state strategy visitor. So these topics we are discussed later. Okay, so that means these are we are considering in the case of creational pattern. So these are the belongs to the only third unit. So those are abstract factory, builder, prototype, singleton. Okay. Next thing is the how design pattern solve design the problem. So that means how we are solving the problems by using this pattern. Design pattern solve many of the day-to-day problems object-oriented designers face and in many different ways. So here several these problems and design patterns solve them. So finding the appropriate objects. So that is the first thing. So that means how we are solving the problems by using the pattern means here what is a pattern? So which type of pattern it is? It is a software architecture pattern. I'm right. So which type of things are considered into the software architecture pattern? So definitely it will be consists of different types of the modules. So now how we are using these modules to solving the real-time problem. So that means first of all finding appropriate objects. So object-oriented programs made up of objects. An object packages both data and their procedures and operate on the data. We also know about this. What is the object? How the objects are created, and how we are run the methods or maybe the objects data. Okay, the procedures are typically called methods and operations. So, for example, maybe we are creating some object from the class. Now that method or maybe the function. So those are run through object only. Am I right? Okay, so those are we can refer as a operations or maybe methods. An object performs an operation when it receives request from a client. So that means when the small object will be performing the action whenever it is received from the request from the client. So we also know about this. So that means whenever, for example, maybe we are designing some software. So in that software, maybe we are using some button, for example, click. So when the user is click that button, then only performing the action. Am I right or not? So that means here, whenever object will be invoking the function, so whenever it is requesting, whenever it is receiving the request from the client. So requests are that only way to get an object to execute an operation. So operations are only the way to change an object's internal data. So because of these restrictions, the object's internal state is said to be encapsulated. It cannot be accessed directly and its representation is invisible from outside the object. So this is already we also know about this. So that means we are not see anything. So when we are click some interface, then it will be performing some other action according to the user requirement. For example, maybe if it is a view details. So then if you are click the view details, then it will be performing its functionality, but we don't know when how it will be run in the inside. So that means actually what is going on here. So when we are click that button, then some object will be run the another method. Okay, that means an object performs an operation when it receives request from a client. At the same time, operations are the only way to change an object's internal data. Okay, next, determine object granularity. So here, in some type of situations, maybe we are verifying the granularity also. Granularity means here we are verifying the hierarchy. Objects can vary tremendously in size and number. They can represent everything down to the hardware or all the way to the entire applications. How do we decide what should be an object? So that means here, in the case of first thing, finding appropriate objects. So that means how we are find out the appropriate objects. So that means here first of all determine so whether it is having any type of the hierarchy or not. So how do we decide what should be an object? So design patterns address issues as well. So the FCAD pattern describes. So these topics we are discussed in this unit. So the FCAD pattern describes how to represent the complete subsystems as objects. So that means here, nothing but here we are mainly focused on to the subclasses. So these subclasses are we are considered into the objects. So the FCAD pattern describes how to represent the complete subsystems as objects, and the fly pattern describes how to support the huge numbers of objects they at the finest granularities. So that means here we are reducing the complexity when we are dividing the subclass. So or when we are decomposing the some other thing, so then it will be definitely having the fine granularity. So we also know about this granularity. So granularity means maintains the some complexity, at the same time it will be maintain some hierarchy. So finest granularities means we are maintains the efficient hierarchy, at the same time we are reducing the complexity. Other design patterns describe specific ways to decomposing an object into smaller objects. Okay, what is abstract factory and builder? Yield objects whose only responsibilities are creating other objects. So in the case of, I'm already mentioned about that in the case of creational patterns, mainly we are discussing about the some topics. So those are nothing but in the case of creational patterns. So abstract factory, builder, factory method, prototype, singleton. So what is the purpose what is the purpose of abstract factory and builder? The name is implies. So these are mainly responsibility for to creating the objects. Okay, next visitor and command. Okay, yield objects whose only responsibilities are implement request on another object group of objects. So that means visitor and command. So these are used for to grouping the objects. So specifying an object interface. So here we definitely mentioned some interface. Otherwise, we are not able to interacting with the objects. Am I right or not? So with the interface only, users can only performing the actions. Am I right or not? We are direct just only we are click the button. So what is the button actually? So that is the one of the interface between user and the object. So an object interface, every operation declared by an object specify the operation's name. The objects it takes the parameters and the operation's return value. So this is known as the operation signatures. So that means whenever so one operation is done by the some software, so that is possible through using objects only. So every operation declared by an object specifies the operation name. The object it takes the parameters. So for example, maybe if we are performing the add something. So how we are add something? We are receiving some values. Okay, so those are referred as a parameters here, and after performing that operation it will be written some value. So completely this will be referred as a operation signature. The set of all signatures defined by an object's operation is called interface to the object. So that means these interfaces are used for to performing the different types of operations by using objects. And an object interface characterizes complete set of requests that can be sent to the object. So any request that matches a signature in the object interface may be sent to the object. So that means here we are using different types of operational signatures. So any request matches the signature in the object interface may be sent to the object. So that means whenever it is receiving some request from the client, then it will be invoking the object operation. So by using this interface, okay, specifying the object implementation. So how we are implementing the object. So far we have said little about how we are actually define an object. An object's implementation defined by its class. Okay, so the class specifies the object's internal data and representation and defines the operations an object can perform. So we also know about this. Actually, so object can able to accessing the data of class. So class is only define the methods and define the variables and define the data. But class is not directly used here. So by using the object only, we are using the class data, class operations, class variables, class methods. Okay, how to select a design your pattern? So with more than 20 design patterns in the catalog to choose from, it might be hard to find the one address particular design problem, especially if the catalog is new and unfamiliar to you. So here several different types of approaches finding the design pattern that's right your problem. So that means here, first of all, we try to select the design pattern. So how we are selecting the our required. So how we are selecting our required designing pattern. So if, for example, maybe if for example, maybe if more than 20 type of patterns are available, then we are not able to decide so which type of pattern is suitable to us. So that's why we try to follow some type of design issues. So those are the first one is consider how design patterns solve the design problems. So design patterns helps you find appropriate objects, determine object granularity, specifying object interface, and several other ways in which design patterns solve the design problems. Referring these discussions help to guide search for the right pattern. Am I right or not? So that means why we are selecting this pattern. So only some type of patterns having the efficiency. Why? Because so if we are selecting the pattern, first of all verifying so whether it will be able to find out the appropriate objects or not. So whether it will be maintains the finest granularity or not. So whether it will be maintains the object interfaces in the proper way or not. So these type of design issues or maybe these type of discussions will be leads to find out the best design pattern. Okay, second one, scan intent sections, the intent sections from all the patterns in the catalog. So read through each pattern into the find one or more sound relevant to the your problem. You can use the classification scheme to narrow your search. So that means here we are using different types of patterns. So we know we try to know which in which type of it will be used. So now we are verifying whether it will be used for to use into the our application or not. So that means here we are based upon the operations of the pattern. So third one, study how patterns interrelate. So relationships between design patterns graphically, studying these relationships can help direct to you to the right pattern or group of patterns. So that means here we are drawing the relationships. We are able to identify the relationships between so these type of patterns one to another. Okay, so the type of the relationship will be we can identify through in the graphical way. And the fourth one is study patterns of like purpose. The catalog has three chapters, one for creational and another for structural and third for behavioral. So each chapter starts off with the introductory comments on the patterns and concludes with a section and contrast them. So these sections give you insight into the similarities and differences between patterns of like purpose. So that means here we are using different types of patterns. So in the case of first criteria also we are discussing about this. What is the purpose? For which purpose we are creating using this pattern? So here we are using three types of patterns. So those are one is the creational, another one is the structural, and another one is the behavioral. So the purpose of the pattern is based upon to the selecting pattern. For example, if we are selecting the creational pattern, the type of the pattern will be used for just only creating the pattern. So in the case of structural patterns, so that will be used for modifying the existing structure, or maybe the we can add whatever it may be required. So those are we are involved. Those are we are inserted into the structure. So another one is the behavioral. So in this, for example, maybe how we are performing the operations, how we are performing those modules operational so, operations. So all these are referred into the behavioral thing. So and another one is the examining cause of redesign. So look at the causes of redesign, starting to see if problem involves one or more of them. So then look at the patterns that help to avoid the causes of redesign. So that means, for example, if you are selecting some pattern, so maybe it is not good. Then how we can correct it? We try to performing the redesign. For example, if you are selecting the best pattern, then there is no need to using the redesign. Am I right or not? So that means when we are selecting the correct design pattern, then there is no need to performing the redesign. So consider what should be variable in our design. This approach the opposite, focusing on the cause of redesign. Instead of considering what might force you to change to design, consider what you do want to be able to change without redesign. So that means initially, so those type of architects and maybe the developers having the proper idea. So what to be we are achieved initially. So then there is no need to chance of occurring the redesign. If you are using the redesign, then automatically it will be increasing the time. At the same time, it will be focus in it will be reflects to the financial issues also. Okay, so that means here we are using different types of ways to selecting the best pattern. Am I right or not? So that means how we are selecting the design pattern. Actually, this is the third topic. Sorry, this is the fourth topic of the third unit. Okay, in the previous case, we are discussing about how we are solving the problems by using the patterns. Now we are discussing about selection and uses. So that means how we are selecting the, or maybe how we are selecting the design pattern. So in the case of first case, so here we are mainly find out the how it will be, whether if the pattern will be find out the appropriate objects, and if it will be able to determine the object's granularity, and if it will be able to specify the object interfaces. So that will be leads to the those type of discussions are used for to selecting the best one. So and the other case we are scanning the operations of that particular pattern. So for example, maybe if those operations are suitable to apply into the our organization or not. If those are suitable, then we can use selecting the pattern. Otherwise, we are not selecting that. So another one is the third one. So that is here we are observing the relations from one pattern to the another pattern. So and in the case of fourth one, so here we are identify the purpose, which type of purpose it is. So actually here we consider three types of patterns. So we can selecting which type of pattern is required now. So and another thing is examine a cause of redesign. So that means, so if for example, maybe after selecting the pattern, so maybe frequently occurring the redesign, then so definitely whatever it may be our selected design pattern, that is not a correct method, or maybe that is not a having a good efficiency. So we need to select the best design pattern to avoid the redesign. And another one is the here we are find out the variables also. So those variables are nothing but here we are using performing different types of operations by using the objects. I'm right or not? So that means here first of all we try to have, we are having clear idea, so what we are achieve. So these type of discussions are need to able to selecting the best design, best design pattern. Okay, how to use the design pattern. So now how we are using this pattern, once you have picked the design pattern, how do you use it? Here's the step-by-step approach to applying the design pattern effectively. So how we are using the pattern. So up to now, just only we are discussing about how we are selecting the best pattern. Now we are discussing about how we are using this pattern. So read the pattern once through for an overview. Pay particular attention to the applicability and consequences sections to ensure the pattern is right for your problem. So that means first of all we try to understand what is the pattern. So what is the purpose of that pattern? Whether it is able to able to determine the object interfaces, at the same time whether it will be able to performing the object activities. Okay, so all these things are first of all verified. So that means should be we are having the overview about the pattern. So how we are able to having the overview of that particular pattern. So read the pattern once completely, and so we try to pay the attention and we try to observe the consequences of the sections. Okay, so then we are able to find out whether we are able to use this pattern into our problem or not. So go back and study the structure, participants and collaboration sections. Make sure understand the classes and objects in the pattern, how they are related to one another. So actually, so we also know about this, but here we are systematically or maybe formally explain these things. For example, maybe if you are designing some software for the some particular organization, for example maybe our college, then which type of modules are here? We have considered students, faculty, principal, management, library, canteen, gym, or maybe some other hospitality also. Okay, so now these are the main modules. Okay, so now how these modules are interconnected to one to another, and how these modules whether we are able to perform in the decomposing these submodules into a, sorry, these modules into a submodules or not. So after dividing the or after decomposing the submodules, then we try to verify the action, so how it will be performed. So that means first of all we are having some idea or maybe design, so in which type of we are creating this software, so in which type of it will be visible to the users, in which type of students will be log into the system. For example, if the users log into the system, then how they are performing the operations. For example, if the faculties are logged into the system, then how they are performing the action. If the principal is logged into the system, then how the principal can able to perform the operation. So that means what is this? So nothing but here we are discussing about design pattern. So in which type of a we are arranging the modules, in which type of a we are performing the operations, and here we are trying to identify the relationship between the different types of the modules. Am I right or not? So that means, so in the initial case, so we are selecting the correct pattern. So now we are observing whether how we are using this. So in the case of second step, go back and study the structure, participants and collaboration sections. Make sure understand the classes and objects in the pattern and how they are related to one to another. So we try to know so the relationship between one to another. So third one, look at the sample code section to see concrete example of the pattern in the code. Studying the code helps you learn how to implement the pattern. So that means we are having the some idea about the code also. So that code will be easy for to implement what we are maybe required. So choose the names for pattern participants that are meaningful in application context. The names for the participants in the design patterns are usually too abstract to appear directly in application. So that means here we are using some names for the participants or maybe the modules or maybe the patterns, design patterns. For example, maybe one of the module may be performing run, so another module may be using execute, so some other module may be verifying status, like this. So that means here the name is implies, so the purpose of the particular participant or maybe the module. So nevertheless it is useful to incorporate the participant name into the name that appears in the application. So that helps make the pattern more explicit in the implementation. For example, if you see the strategy pattern for a test compositing algorithm, then you might have class simple layout strategy, a test layout strategy. So that means in this step, mainly we are focused on to the names for the participant patterns. So that means which thing will be invoked here. Okay. So and the fifth one, define the classes. declare their interfaces, establish their inheritance relationships, and define the instance variables and that represent data and the object reference. So that means what is a class? So it will be able to define the interface and establishing their inheritance relationships and define the instance variables and that represent the data and object references. So that means how many number of objects are created, how many number of variables are used, which type of operations are used, how many number of subclasses are created, and which type of interfaces are used. So all these are nothing but the description about the classes. Identify existing classes in your application. That pattern will affect and modify them accordingly. So nothing but here we try to identify how many number of classes are there. Sixth one is define application specific names for operation in the pattern. So that means here we are define the application and specific names for the operations in the pattern. So here again the names generally depend upon the application. So use the responsibilities and collaborations associated with each operation as a guide. So also be consistent in your naming conventions. For example, maybe you might use the create prefix consistency to denote the factory method. So here also we are mainly focused on to the names for the application. So that application is also uh, definitely prefixed with the suitable name. So then it will be providing the easier interaction with the users. So implement the operations to carry out the responsibilities and collaborations in the pattern. The implementation section offers hints to guide the into the implementation. These examples in the sample code section can help as well. So that means up to now we're discussing how we are selecting the best pattern. Next, how we are using the pattern. So that means first of all, we try to identify or maybe they understand. So what is the main overview of the pattern? Second thing, we try to study and we try to know about the relationships within the modules. And in the case of third step, here we are observing the code. So if you know about the code only, we are able to implement. Am I right? And for example, maybe if any error is occurred, so then we try to find out the errors in your code. So that means if we are correcting the code, then we are easily implementing what we are required now. So and another one, choose the names for the pattern participant. So that means, for example, maybe that participant is admin, or maybe that participant is maybe user, or maybe that participant is maybe new user, like this. So these names for the participants design patterns are usual to abstract to appear directly in an application. So that means it will be providing some type of the abstraction. So another thing is the define the classes. So what is a class? How many number of objects are there? What are the types of variables? What are the types of methods? How many number of subclasses are divided? And how many number of interfaces are used? And with the how many number of object references are provided? So all these things are mentioned in the define the classes. In the case of define application, so here we are defining the application with the specific names for the operations in the pattern. So that means each and every operation will be mentioned with the suitable name. So otherwise users not able to understand for which purpose we are creating that particular type of the module. So that means here we are trying to verifying the responsibilities of those modules also. Okay, and implement the operations to carry out the responsibilities and collaborations in the pattern. So for example, maybe if you are based upon the some software. So previously I mentioned the same thing. For example, maybe if you are designing some software for the college, so then we are selecting so which type of pattern is suitable to us, and here we are collecting different types of the modules. So for example, maybe if this module is used, then it will be able to performing these type of actions. Am I right or not? So now first of all, for example, maybe if you are giving to the some organization the same software, then how the software will be used for that organization. So we would try to explain by step. So for example, maybe this software having this number of modules. So this module is used for to performing this operation. If you're having any type of the problem, then you can use this like this. So I'm right or not? So that means we are giving entire explanation about the particular software to the who are maybe the end users. So now the end users verify before using the software. So clearly, so how we are using this. So for example, if the situation is like this, then how we are correct this, and how we are using the same modules, performing the operations by using the interface. So all these things are related how we are using the selecting design pattern. Okay, now we are discussing about the software design pattern. In a software engineering, a design pattern is a general reusable solution to a commonly occurring the problem with the given context in a software design. We also know about this. So in software engineering, a design pattern is a general reusable solution to a commonly occurring the problem within a given context in a software design. So that means here we are designing the software. That software is we are performing the number of times we are reusing the same thing. Why? Because reducing the complexity and reducing the financial issues and increasing the productivity. And if, for example, maybe if those are similar structures, then why we are again the design? So that's why we are based upon the reusable the things. So that is nothing but software design. So a design pattern is not finished design that can be transformed directly into code. So a design pattern is a not a finished design. So that can be transformed directly into the code. So through code only we are implementing this. So it is a description or a template for how to solve a problem that can be used in many different types of situations. So we are already discussing about this. Patterns are used like as a templates. So what is a template? So actually the template thing is different, but it will be used for handle more than one situation. For example, maybe I am busy. This is one template. So the same template will be used for different types of the pupils in different types of the situations. Am I right or not? So in the same way, so that means we also know about the templates also. So we need not write the new thing. So we try to use the same thing for two different types of situations. Okay, for example, if it is integer data, using the same template. If it is a floating data, using the same type of data. If you are using the character data, then also we are using the same type of template. So that means here reducing the code by using the templates. So that means these patterns are used for solving the problems efficiently, and at the same time we are selecting the best pattern. Otherwise, it will be creating the lot of the problems. So patterns are formalized best practices that you must implement yourself in your application. Object-oriented design patterns typically show relationships, interactions between classes or objects without specifying final application classes or objects that are known. So we also know about this. So in the case of object-oriented design patterns, here mainly we are verifying the relationships between and classes and objects and their interactions and how they are collaborated one to another. So many patterns simply object orientation are more generally mutable state, and so many not be as applicable in functional programming languages in which data is immutable or treated as such. So that means here, so more than in number of times more than one pattern are not based upon the object orientation. So at this time of situation we are not able to achieve our whatever we are having the goal. So if we are based upon the object oriented concepts, then we can easily performing the things. So that means here, so whether it is in the mutable state or maybe the immutable state. So and another thing is design patterns reside in the domain of modules and interconnections. Okay, so design patterns in the domain modules and interconnections. At higher level, there are architectural patterns that are larger in scope, usually describing an overall pattern followed by an entire system. So there are many types of design patterns like here. So that means up to now we are discussing so how we are selecting the best design pattern and how to we are using the design pattern and another thing. So what is a software design pattern? So that means what is a software design pattern here? What we are considering means here we are using some object-oriented concepts within those type of patterns. Okay, here we are having different types of design patterns. So those are the first one is algorithm strategy patterns, computational design patterns, execution patterns, implementation strategy patterns, structural design patterns. So the name is implies for in which type of we are using those type of patterns here. We can see one by one. So algorithm strategy patterns addressing concerns related to the high level strategies describe how to exploit the application characteristics on a computing platform. So that means here we are using algorithm strategies. So that means step by step type of the situation. So that means for example initially log into the system, then we can register into the system, then we can view the details. Then in this type of here we are performing in the algorithm strategy. So addressing concerns related to high level strategies describe how to exploit the application characteristics on a computing platform. So another thing is the computational design patterns. The name is implies here we are performing the computational things. So addressing concerns related to the key computation identification. For example, when we are logged into the system directly, it will be giving the addresses. So for example, maybe pay the fees, maybe for example, generate the report like this. So performing some computation. So we also know about what is the computation, performing the operation by the system. Execution pattern, that patterns these patterns address concerns related to the supporting application execution, including strategies in execution streams of tasks and building blocks to support task synchronization. So that means how this pattern will be performing the execution, how the interaction between the one module to the another module. So these type of things are mainly concerned in the case of execution patterns. So and the next one is implementation strategy patterns, addressing concerns related to the implementing source code to the support. So without source code, we are not able to implement, am I right or not? So that's why here we try to implement the source code. So then program organization and the common data structure specific parallel to the programming. So here we are able to organizing the program. So in that program, we are mentioned different types of structures and different types of variables and methods. So, and the last one is structural design patterns, addressing concerns related to the high level structures of applications being developed. So that means up to now we are discussing three types of the topics here. So the first one is role in solving design problems. So that means how the patterns able to solving the problems. Okay, how the selected patterns able to solving the problem. And the second thing, how we are selecting the best pattern. And third thing is how we are using the selected pattern. So now we are discussing about different types of patterns. So that means some of the patterns like this algorithm strategy patterns, some of the patterns based upon the computational design patterns, and some of the patterns based upon the execution patterns, some of the patterns based upon the implementation pattern. Another one is the structural design pattern. So that means we can select which is suitable to us. So actually each and every pattern will be able to performing the same thing, but here we are giving some more importance for the particular pattern. For example, in the case of algorithm strategy, for each and every operation we are based upon the algorithms. So in the case of computational design patterns, here mainly giving the more importance how we are performing the computation. So in the same way, how we are giving the execution, how do we are implementing the how we are implementing the software patterns. And the last case is structural design patterns. So that means up to now we are discussing about pattern description, organizing the catalogs, and how the patterns will be solving the problems, and how we are selecting the patterns, and how we are using the patterns. Am I right or not? So that means, so in the next class, so if you, I think you are able to see the screen now. So whatever it may be, I mentioned in the 4 topics in the third unit of the first part. So those are completed here. If you having any type of doubts, you please ask me. So otherwise, you try to study these topics once. In the next class, we try to discuss about the next topic, that is creational patterns. So abstract factory, builder, factory method, prototype, singleton. So these type of topics are we try to cover in the later classes. If you having any type of the doubts, please ask me now. Otherwise, we can end the session. I will try to complete this unit as early as possible. Why? Because in front we are having the mid. So we don't know how we are attempt that mid. You don't try to assume number of questions like this, how we are write the exam. So whether we are going to the college or whether it is online. So I think those are not necessary. We don't know. So up to receiving some proper instructions, so we are not able to decide. So what will be happen here? So that's why don't worry about those type of things. We try to prepare to attend the exam. So we try to think later how we are attend the exam. So first of all, we try to how to prepare the exam. Okay, so why? Because yeah, internal marks also the giving most impact to score best marks in the exam. So you try to understand the topics, whatever it may be. I'm saying in the SADP. So you try, if you're having any type of the doubts, you can try to contact me. No problem. You don't try to hesitate to ask me. So you can call or message me. So then I will try to clear whatever it may be your doubt. Okay, I think most of the members familiar with this subject. Why? Because these topics completely related with the software engineering. At the same time, some of the topics related with the object-oriented concepts, and some of the topics may be related with the artificial intelligence. Some of the topics related with the database management system. Okay, so if any member is having the doubt, please ask me. Otherwise, I can end the session. And all of the members, please submit the second assignment also. So I will announce the names in the next class who are not submitting the assignment up to now. First assignment, what I'm saying is first assignment who are not submitted up to now. So please submit that. Other and you try to remember another thing. Each and every unit having one assignment. So this assignment is also having the marks. Okay, don't try to feel it is a one of the burden or trouble. No, it is a problem. Why? Because why I'm doing these type of why I'm giving these type of exercises to you. So those are more helpful in the exam point of view. So if you're having the clear idea about these topics, then you clearly giving the total amount of presentation in the better way, I think, in the exam. Okay, so please don't be feel about like that. Okay, okay, then I end the session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.